Good evening. At this time, I want to invite you to join in a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome to the Sumter School District April 26, 2021 Board of Trustees meeting work session. All persons wishing to attend the virtual meeting may do so via YouTube Sumter School District Board meetings and Sumter School District's Facebook page. Due to COVID-19 and in compliance with recent public health orders, no member from the public will be able to attend the meetings in person. This meeting is held in accordance with the Freedom of Information Act. The news media has been notified, and a copy of the agenda has been made available to the public. The mission. The mission of Sumter School District is to equip students to be responsible, successful, and productive citizens in a global society. The vision. Sumter School District develops and cultivates competitive students who embrace diversity, act responsibly, and contribute positively to society. Your board members are Barbara Jackson, Chairwoman, yours truly, J. Frank Baker, Vice Chairman, Darrell McGaney, the clerk, Brian Alston, Area 1, Cheryl Ray, Area 2, Matthew McLeod, Area 3, Johnny Hilton, Area 4, Gloria Lee, Area 6, Sean Reagan, Seat 9, Robin Mills, in absentia, Shaw Air Force Base Representative, our Superintendent, Dr. Penelope E. Martin-Knox, and Amy M. Hanson, our Administrative Manager. This meeting is called to order. Good evening. I want to take this opportunity to thank you for your continued interest in Sumter School District. 2.1 is the approval of the agenda, and upon a consensus and with no objections, the agenda will stand approved as written. Are there any objections? Hearing none, the agenda is approved. 3.1 is announcement. Trustees, I want to offer you this opportunity to share any announcements that you may have at this time. We will first hear from Mr. Reagan, the facilities chairperson.
Yes, ma'am, Madam Chair. I had the opportunity to visit two schools on last week Wednesday, Manchester Elementary School, as well as Farmer Middle School. I just wanted to say I had a wonderful time, and I want to say thank you to both principals at Farmer Middle School, Mr. Riggins and Dr. Ty at Manchester Elementary School. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reagan. Any others? Okay, Mr. Alston.
Yes, Madam Chair. On the 15th of April, I had the opportunity to attend a webinar entitled Seats at the Table, sharing school board members' perspectives on race and racism hosted by Board Docs. It was a very informative and engaging webinar to hear perspectives of board members across the nation and the work that they're doing. And on tomorrow, I will be attending another webinar entitled Level Up Law, School Expulsions, Know Your Rights, hosted by the South Carolina Legal Services. And tomorrow afternoon, the Rafton Creek Elementary School Family Engagement Workshop on bridging communication between families and schools. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Austin.
Madam Chair, I left off, Lamar Elementary. Sorry, Dr. Canty.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Reagan.
No problem.
And I also would like to report that I also attended the activity over at Lamara, which was very well represented with the legislative delegation, as well as county council and city council as well. It was a great day over at Lamara. And I'd like to say happy birthday again to Mr. Sean Reagans and Mr. Austin. Happy birthday to you.
Thank you.
All right, we're now down to our committee reports for 3.2. And committee chairman, will you now provide reports as applicable? And I will begin with the Citizen Advisory Committee. This committee will meet in a virtual format on April 29th at 6 p.m. The committee members will receive the meeting link information on Wednesday in preparation for the Thursday meeting. Mr. Reagan, do you have a report for the facilities?
There's no report for the Facilities Committee at this time.
Thank you. Mrs. Ray, Finance.
No report at this time.
Thank you. Policy Committee, Mr. Alston.
Yes, ma'am. The Policy Committee met on April 22nd. Policies for continued review are as follows: ACA and ACA-R. Samples, the administration and staff are actively addressing the work of equity, and the committee looks forward to an update on the development of an equity policy. JCA, assignment of students to schools. This policy is a board function, and policy committee will review in more detail at an upcoming meeting and looks forward to discussion with the full board at a future date. JLCDD, school resource officers. This policy is currently under review by the administration and staff, and the policy committee looks forward to reviewing recommendations in the future. Policy recommendations at the regular board meeting in May include review of SCASPA recommendation, removal of emotional support language from the policy due to the specifics that surround the language. Per the ADA, emotional support animals are not qualified as service animals and do not have the same legal right to access public spaces. BDE and BD-R board committees. The policy committee recommends the optimization of the Citizens Advisory Committee into the formation of subcommittees. KF, community use of school facilities, and there's a document attached for the board's review. And that concludes my report. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Alston. We're now down to the Transportation Ad Hoc Committee. Dr. Baker, do you have any reports?
No, ma'am, no report at this time.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Baker. 3.3 legislative update. Dr. Hilton, are you prepared to provide the legislative update?
Yes, ma'am. Just a reminder, however, that we all received an email this afternoon, and one on Friday and one on Thursday. It goes into way more detail than I provide for you each week. This is just a summary. But you do have much more in-depth information that you receive via email. Tomorrow, the House Ways and Means Revenue Policy Legislative Subcommittee will consider a bill creating an educational scholarship account program that provides a per-pupil state funding amount for parents to pay expenses at private schools. The School Boards Association is opposed to this legislation. Also, there is a bill in the Senate being considered that will limit the amount of per-pupil state funding a district can receive to operate a virtual school during the next school year, 21-22, not to exceed the state-determined amount per pupil for virtual charter schools as determined by the Revenue and Fiscal Affairs Office. And the School Boards Association is opposed to that legislation as well. The state budget is being considered by the full Senate tomorrow. In that budget, among many other things, there's a $1,000 pay raise for teachers, a $65 million increase for state-aged classrooms that is estimated to bring the state, and to increase the base student cost to $2,516. Last week, the governor signed a bill into law creating a process for school boards to request one or more of their schools to be designated as schools of innovation that are exempt from certain state laws, regulations, and local board policies. Also last week, the House voted to give second reading to a joint resolution enacting the COVID-19 Liability Immunity Act that establishes immunity from coronavirus claims for businesses and governmental entities, including school districts and their employees. The immunity only applies if public health guidelines have been followed. A Senate subcommittee voted last week to give a favorable report enacting the South Carolina Computer Science Education Initiative Act to expand and enhance computer science education in high schools. Among other things, the bill directs each high school to offer at least one rigorous standards-based computer science course no later than year after next, 22-23 school year. Last week, the House Education and Public Works Committee approved and sent to the full House a bill revising the state accountability system, among other things, that will dissolve duly elected school boards in districts declared to be in a state of educational emergency. Also approved and sent to the House was a bill to evaluate the state teacher preparation programs in our colleges and universities and to develop and release an annual report, a report card on teacher preparation programs. In addition, the full House received a bill to remove social studies subject testing in grades 3 through 8 and to direct certain diagnostic information to be included in the assessments and to direct all high school students to take ACT. The bill requiring 5-day-a-week instruction has passed. Also included in that bill is a prohibition for school districts to assign next year a teacher to instruct students in both in-person and virtual instruction unless it is, quote, reasonable and necessary because of extreme and unavoidable circumstances and must include extra pay for those teachers. The same bill also allowed retired educators to return to work if they have been retired since April 21st of 2019 and earn up to $50,000 annually for 36 consecutive months without affecting their monthly retirement pay. That concludes my report.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Hilton, for the legislative update. Okay, we're down now to 4.0, the superintendent's report. Dr. Martin Knox will now provide the information listed under the superintendent's report, and you may proceed to the next topic upon completion of each report or presentation. 4.1 being Office of Academics Summer Program. 4.2 Office of Finance General Fund Statement of Revenue and Expenditures through March 31st, 2021. 4.3 Office of Finance Capital Project Update through March 31st, 2021. 4.4 Office of Finance General Fund Fiscal Year 2022 Budget. And 4.5 Office of Finance ESSER 2 Spending Plan. ESSER 2 Spending Plan. Dr. Martin Knox,
Yes,
you
ma'am.
have the floor.
Yes, ma'am. So good evening, Chairwoman Jackson, Vice Chairman Baker, members of the Sumter School District, and member of the Sumter School District Board and community. At this time, I will yield to Dr. Jada McLeod, Dr. Brenda Hafner, Dr. Lamont Moore, and Ms. Veron Davis to provide a presentation on what we are classifying as academic recovery. So at this time, I will yield to the presenters to share the information.
It's a pleasure to be here to share this information with you. Let me narrate, first of all, how tirelessly our teachers, administrators, and support staff have been working to engage our students in meaningful instruction since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. They have been working very hard to minimize the impact of the pandemic academically, as well as providing social and emotional support to our students. I'd like to take this time to highlight just a few ways we've been addressing additional instructional support and are planning in moving forward. So if you'll notice on slide 2, there's a brief timeline. First, Sumter School District utilized federal, state, and local grant funds to support 2020 summer learning for targeted groups such as the Learn, Evaluate, Analyze, and Prepare Camp. You may remember it as LEAP for students in K through 8. We also partnered with the city to provide the city's STEAM Career Camp. Although we were unable to have our traditional Read to Succeed summer reading camp in June, we were able to offer a modified version in the 2020 Academic Recovery Camp, and that was known as ARC later last summer. And in the high schools, we provided a series of Gear Up camps. As the 2021 school year began, we implemented the attendance recovery plan that was shared with the board during the March 22 meeting. As we have recovered these students, schools have been targeting them to ensure continued engagement and provide a variety of academic, social, and emotional supports. In the fall of this year, schools began to identify additional groups of students needing instructional support. After school tutoring programs with additional target populations began, some as early as September 1st, with the High School Gear Up grant sponsoring in-house tutoring and utilizing iTutor. Elementary and middle schools began to offer tutoring services as students began to return to in-person instruction. In December, conversations began regarding the need for additional content credit recovery at the conclusion of the semester, as well as the need for individualized interventions to close any skills gaps that students may have and address any unfinished learning. During the January 13th staff meeting, a new K-12 resource known as Exact Path was introduced and an overview was provided for principals. Exact Path combines adaptive diagnostic assessments with individualized learning paths for kindergarten through 12th grade students in math, reading, and language arts. The program puts individual student growth first, giving students the tools to take control over their own academic journey while providing educators with ongoing data to facilitate targeted support. Exact Path provides a continuum of learning options, including brick and mortar, hybrid, and fully virtual, and it fits seamlessly in each situation to help students where they are and address unfinished learning. At that time, the Office of Academics also began to work with school-level personnel to identify priority standards in the APEX program for middle and high school to assist with content recovery. As you know, the first semester concluded on January 20th, and data meetings began early February with each school to review their data and determine a tailored school plan for content recovery in the targeted intervention. Content recovery began on or around February 20th at most schools. In March, the Department of Education announced and held training sessions on a new data tool that they were providing. Training on the data tool through Rally Educational Analytics took place March 30th and 31st for district instructional leaders across the state. This tool was provided to all districts to assist in analyzing data and monitor effects on achievement that may have been caused by the pandemic. During the April 14th staff meeting after spring break, an overview of the Rally Analytics was presented to the principals, and school-level Rally support meetings have been ongoing since that time, as needed by the individual school. This data tool, as well as other district-level data, is being used to develop a road to recovery plan, which is due to the State Department by May 28th. The Office of Academics continues to work with school-level personnel to identify priority standards for quarters 3 and 4 in middle and high school to customize the Apex modules to continue the content recovery. Before we move on, I would like to ask Dr. Moore to share an overview of the Rally Analytics data spreadsheet with you. I think some of you who are very informed with the data will find it very interesting and helpful. Dr. Moore, can you please share your screen and demonstrate how the district and schools can use this data tool to monitor student achievement and growth to better inform our decisions?
Thank you, Dr. McLeod, and good evening, everyone. So today I am going to show you the data tool that Dr. McLeod was referring to. This was provided to us by the South Carolina Department of Ed, and has been a training that has been provided to all of the district contacts regarding how to use this spreadsheet. On April 14th, we reviewed this tool with all of our principals, and this specific spreadsheet captures all of the historical data from the NWEA map and South Carolina Ready assessments in the subject areas of ELA and math for grades 1 through 8. It pulls data from the time that students were tested, if available, up into the winter of 2020. And it's designed to measure the impact of COVID-19 on these students. So today we're going to look at the district spreadsheet. However, the principals were each given their own school level version of this spreadsheet. And as Dr. McLeod stated earlier, many of the schools have reached out to our office for follow-up meetings with their leadership teams to dig even deeper into this data. I stated that this particular data tool has assessment data from the NWEA map and South Carolina Ready up until winter 2020. The South Carolina Department of Education is planning to provide us with an updated spreadsheet that will include spring assessment data later on this school year. So as you can see in this particular tool, there's several tabs at the bottom. I'm going to take you through a few of them. The one that you're looking at now captures achievement data. It is reporting that achievement data in percent values, and it's looking at 3 tiers. Now, the achievement data is just looking at the current performance levels of the students. This tiered data, as you can see, column D gives you tier 1, column C gives you tier 2, and column B gives you tier 3. So these tiers were decided upon after the State Department looked at all of these scores across the state, and they determined where 80% of the students all is considered tier 1. They also looked at the 15% of students that will be considered for tier 2, and tier 3 refers to that 5% of your student population in a normal distribution that would need some support because of severe achievement issues. Now, we're looking at this chart for the district, and as you can see in green, I've highlighted our district totals. In a normal distribution, tier 1 should represent at least 80% of your student body, and right now we're at 71%. Tier 2 should be 15% or lower, and right now we're at 22%. And tier 3 should be 5% or less at that severe achievement, and we're at 5.29. You'll notice that this particular chart has a lot of data slicers. And the principal's version of this spreadsheet also have the same data slicers. This allows us to look at the data from various perspectives. For example, if we only wanted to look at ELA, I could select the ELA subject area, and you'll notice that the chart changes to match what I've selected. And you'll see that the percentages change as well. So tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 change based on what I selected. If I wanted to look at ELA and only looked at the female students, I could select female. So now I have ELA and female selected, and you get the same information based on what I have selected. You'll notice to the very far right, there is a graph that matches this information. It's color-coded. As you can see, the colors are there for you to identify what you're looking at. So this just provides a visual representation of what is depicted in the chart. And so as you can see, principals and our office we have a very useful tool where we can look at different populations, we can look at different subject areas, we can look at various school names are here, and to see exactly how our students are performing and make the best decisions. Now, as I stated before, this particular tab looks at the achievement data, which is their present performance levels, and it looks at them in 3 tiers. Those tiers, those cut scores are determined by the state. If we took another look at achievement, the quartile view, and hopefully everyone can see that, this provides a different view of the same student data. Instead of tiers, you'll see that the information is broken into 4 quadrants or quartiles. And in a normal distribution, you would want 25% of your student population to fall in each of these quartiles. Of course, you have the low achievement quartile, the mid-low achievement quartile, the mid-high achievement quartile, and the high achievement quartile. Again, as we stated, 25% in a normal distribution. Ideally, we would want a lot of our students to fall in the mid-high to high achievement quartiles. And as you can see in green, where our students fell using this particular tool. Now, we're looking at both subject areas, and we have not selected any of the data slicers, but just like in the previous tab, if I chose ELA, that means now I'm looking at just one subject area, and the chart changed as well as the graph to your right. And you can see the color code to match the different quartiles. We still have the same flexibility to choose any of these data slicers to look at our data and to determine what needs to be done for our students. If we look at the other tabs on this particular spreadsheet, this also gives us gap data, and that gap data is defined as if we were to look at our students and predict where they would be pre-COVID-19 and compare it to where they actually are, this will give us the gap data. So the next tabs will give us a view of exactly how our students did based on where they were predicted to perform if COVID never happened. So we're going to look at that same information. This is the gap data in percent values. Again, we're looking at this information in tiers. And remember, at least 80% should fall in tier 1 in a normal distribution. At least 15% should fall in tier 2 in a normal distribution. And at least 5% or below should fall in tier 3. As you can see, if we're looking at ELA and math, we're at 77.89% for tier 1, 18.7 in tier 2, and 3.41 in tier 3. If we were to choose the same data slicer that we've been choosing, ELA, just to take a look at how things change. Right now, 76% of our students are in tier 1, and that the normal distribution would be 80%. 19% of our students are in tier 2, and 4% are in Tier 3. Again, we have the same data slashers on this tab as well, and we are able to customize our view on any of the data at any point to take a look at how our students are doing. This particular spreadsheet also gives us that information in quartile form. So we were looking at the tiers. Now we're back to quartiles, which looks at 4 quadrants. And you have, as we had before, our high gap quartile, our mid-high gap quartile, our mid-low, and our low gap quartile. In normal distributions, when you're looking at quartile data, 25% of your population should fall in each quartile. And as you can see, our percentages are there as it relates to that 25%. If we chose ELA, like we've been selecting, you'll see the chart change with the percentages as well as the graph that is included on each of these tabs. This particular tool also gives schools and districts a summary report, and it lets us know as far as gap data, where we're performing on a whole, and achievement data, how we're performing on a whole. And as you can see, I'm gonna deselect ELA and math. And so we'll have 22% of our students have that, or it's reflected in the gap tier summary, and 25% is reflected in the achievement tier summary. So this just gives us a one-shot view of how the students are doing in both ELA and math. The final tab provides a tool that guides the discussions. So after looking at this particular summary, and as you can see on this far right of this, the summary information is shown again for ELA and math, and then you have this flow chart that is designed to guide us through discussions about the data. As you can see, if more than 20% of the students are showing to have impacted, then that means that the students in our school district are more negatively impacted by their learning experience this year as compared to the state average. If our summary data shows that it's 20% or lower, then that means that the students in our school or school district did not seem to have a stronger negative impact in their learning this year as compared to the state average. And so as you can see, there's some follow-up questions that we can use to pose or to guide our discussion at the district level and at the school level on both sides. And at the very top, if we wanted to identify or do some goal setting, they give us the opportunity to do that. So as you can see, this particular tool provides us with a lot of opportunities to discuss how our students are doing. It gives us a lot of opportunities to look at the data from different perspectives and to start having those needful conversations or continue to have those needful conversations as we plan for academic recovery. So again, this tool was provided by the South Carolina Department of Ed, and we will be getting a new version of this to include the spring MAP assessment data and eventually the spring South Carolina Ready information for ELA and math. And I'm going to stop sharing there and turn it back over to Dr. McLeod and Dr. Hafner.
Good evening, and thank you, Dr. Moore. Ms. Hanson, could you please put us on slide 4, please? There we go, thank you. As you've heard, Dr. McLeod referenced the content recovery that has been put into place, and I would like to take a moment to cover the framework for that program. In an attempt to recover segments of content from quarters 1 and 2 essential standards, schools worked with the Office of Academics to design a specific number of modules from an approved academic enrichment program that must be completed for each subject area in order for the student to receive a passing grade for that quarter. Our elementary schools had the flexibility to set up the progress monitoring, tutoring, and extra supports outside of the normal school day as best suited their building needs. They decided to focus explicitly on reading and math. Many schools utilize the Exact Path program as it offers a pre-assessment to specifically identify the skill gaps for the student and establish the modules necessary to gain mastery of that skill. Since middle and high schools needed to focus on all 4 core, they decided to utilize APEX. The school instructional personnel works with the Office of Academics to identify priority standards within the APEX curriculum that could constitute content recovery. Upon completion of the modules, the highest possible grade that can be earned by the student is a 60. Grades would need to be overridden in the grade book with a note regarding the extended time and completion of the supplemental essential standard modules. In order to offer certified support for the students, we budgeted up to 40 hours of additional support at each school. The pay for these positions was $30 an hour. As discussed, the identified days of the week are flexible by school. These funds have come out of CRF and/or ESSER 1. The Office of Academics has and will continue to work with the school personnel in order to identify priority standards for quarters 3 and 4. At the end of semester 1, schools sent out letters and made phone calls that extended this opportunity to 4,462 students. I want to reiterate how hard our school personnel and our principals have worked to try to get this opportunity out to our students. On the next slide, you'll see that we are currently in the process of establishing the guidelines for our summer programs. Grades kindergarten through 8th grade will host a true summer school that mirrors the guidelines established by the Read to Succeed camps. For students in kindergarten through 8th grade, this will run 4 days a week from June 7th through July 1st. While the initial audience of the program is for the students who failed the grade this year, we also want to make it available for remediation with some of our other students in need. As you've seen, the program provided to us by the State Department of Education, Education Analytics, will help us better identify these students. In an effort to best offer individualized instruction, we are aiming for no more than 10 to 12 students in a class, and certainly no more than 15. The Office of Academics has put together a selection of research-based curriculum that can be utilized by each school with the cost included into the summer school budget. The pre-assessment for summer school will be based upon the spring map 2021. Now, knowing that our teachers have worked extremely hard this past year and knowing that they are likely more tired than normal, the ESSER funds afforded to us by the state and federal government allow us to offer teachers $50 an hour and paraprofessionals $30 an hour to assist the summer school. Let me be clear, this is an allowable expense only for the duration of the ESSER funding. We have included the cost of meals and transportation for all students. A certified administrator is required to run each summer school program, and we felt the need for at least one of the school's counselors to be present to assist with the social emotional piece. In addition, we have budgeted for a receptionist to be present, as well as a part-time registrar or power school person to update and verify grades. And on the next slide, you'll see that our high schools will be running their credit recovery programs during the same time frame of June 7th through July 1st. This program will channel students who have failed to APEX or recovery modules. Students who are led toward retaking full courses through virtual SC would be afforded the opportunity of transportation and tutoring with available teachers if requested. Again, knowing that our teachers have worked extremely hard this past year, the ESSER funds afforded to us by the state and federal government allow us to offer the teachers $50 an hour and paraprofessionals $30 to assist with the summer school. And I'll reiterate, this is allowable only for the duration of the ESSER funding. As stated, we have included the cost of meals and transportation for all students at the high school level as well. A certified administrator will oversee each summer learning program. Here too, we felt the need to budget for at least one school counselor for the social emotional piece. And in addition, we have budgeted for a receptionist to be present, as well as a part-time registrar or power school person to update and verify grades. We are currently in the process of securing nurses and working with our local police forces in order for our school resource officers to be present on our high school campuses during our summer learning opportunities.
Okay, as we continue to plan our road to recovery, we understand this will not be a quick fix, but a plan that will extend through the 21-22 school year and probably beyond. We are continuously monitoring students and their academic progress, and we're working with schools to develop Jump Start camps in July, and these are intended to target Tier 2 and transition groups, but not limited to those. Once again, the Office of Academics has provided various standards-based instructional resources to engage those students. There'll be a strong focus in our Road to Recovery plan to address the social and emotional needs of our students as they transition back to full face-to-face instruction. As we continue to move forward, progress monitoring will be of the utmost importance. Our plan may change frequently to provide appropriate supports for our students based on the most current data. To address academic achievement, we acknowledge we need to address many other factors in the lives of our students. Ms. Davis will provide some information concerning the wraparound services we're putting in place for our students and families.
Afternoon. Next slide, Amy. The Office of Student Support Services will have a dedicated team during the summer months of June and July to provide wraparound services and support for our staff and students. This team will consist of a school psychologist, a behavior interventionist, a social worker, and specialized program counselors. They will focus on SEL support, mental health support, behavior intervention support, as well as trauma support to our students. We also have our mental health counselors who will be available at each school. They are working under the umbrella of the Santee Watery Mental Health, and they have been given permission to work directly face-to-face during the summer months with our students for additional support. As Dr. Hafner has indicated, our school counselors will be available as well. And then we also have a team of health services staff who will be on site to support with wraparound services during the summer time frame. Thank you.
As we continue to refer to the Road to Recovery plan, I wanted to provide you the framework. On the slide, you'll see the different components of the plan. These components are common to all of us in education. This is how we plan. The State Department has tasked all districts to develop and submit an academic recovery plan detailing goals and strategies for providing annual growth in English language, arts, and math for all students and catch-up growth for those most impacted by the pandemic. While the request focuses on ELA and math, we may also give attention to other areas, particularly for credit-bearing pathways that lead to on-time graduation. Districts have been encouraged to use the interim data spreadsheet that Education Analytics distributed on March 26th, as well as other data resources within the district to develop this plan. And as Dr. Moore mentioned, we'll be receiving an updated plan with the spring data as well. And our schools are using the data tool and completing a similar process as we develop the plan, monitor the progress, and adjust as needed. As we continue to monitor the data, we do anticipate there may be a need for additional after-school tutoring throughout the 21-22 school year. Most likely, additional summer learning again next year, and possibly a continuation into the 22-23 school year due to the fact that we had such an impact from COVID-19 on everyone. Our district plan has to be submitted to the State Department by May 28th. And as we move forward in this road to recovery, we will be providing additional updates to you. At this time, I'd ask Dr. Martin, do you have any additional information that you would like to share or comments?
No, just thank you guys for the presentation. And at this time, if there are any questions of the board.
Oh, okay.
He was first.
Cheryl was first, okay. All right, I just had a question about the data tool that's given by the state. I know you've made some connections with that using the tiers. I was just wondering how else that will be used to target certain students. And you said that each principal got one for their school. I want to know who is overseeing that are they're going to be doing similar things at schools, or do they have the freedom to do whatever they want to do to address their problems at their school? Or and the bottom line is, you know, how are we establishing equity for all the students to have these opportunities to be more successful and to recover their content?
Did you all hear? So the question is, what is the guidance for our school-based leaders in terms of utilizing the Rally tool? And what is the expectation in terms of each school meeting the needs of their children when we're looking at it with an equity focus? Did I capture?
More or less, yeah.
From what I believe I heard, all the students K through 8 will utilize the analytics to identify that third tier of students that need to get the assistance during the first summer assistance in June. And then in July, as we move towards front loading skills moving into the next year, that middle tier, tier 2 students, should be an additional targeted group. Of course, the schools have the freedom to utilize the many facets of the program that Dr. Moore highlighted to identify individualized small groups throughout the year and the after-school programs coming up in the 21-22 school year.
And the other part of the question that I omitted was who would be overseeing the utilization of the Rally tool and or the implementation?
The implementation and the training of the Rally tool is coming through the Office of Academics. Dr. McLeod, I don't want to overstep on your part, but if you want to speak to that, please do so.
Correct, and we are required to provide post data for these programs, so we will be able to see the impact that our efforts are making on the students. And even though we have specific targeted groups based on where they currently are, again, this may change some with this as the spring data is reported. And we've had calls, and I've referred them back to their school leadership, of parents that are just concerned that their child may not be failing, their child may not show up in that lowest tier, but they feel that they need more support to be prepared for next year. And we're more than willing to accommodate that also.
Okay, so am I understanding each school will have their summer school program, because you were saying that they could do some things, they had freedom to make some decisions, Are we having summer school at every school?
That's correct.
Okay. Okay. Who's next? Darryl, okay.
Chairman and Dr. Martin, I was maybe able to chime in regards to the ESSER funds. I heard Dr. Hefner gave a breakdown of the utilization of the funds to teachers and paraprofessionals. And I heard her mention transportation. Is she talking about bus drivers? Okay, bus drivers and will custodians be privy to any of that?
So they all will. Anyone who's working our summer schools will have an opportunity to be compensated for that time, but yes, it does.
Thank you.
And as Dr. Hafner said, I don't know who said it, but it is an allowable expense, just as long as the funds exist.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Austin?
Yes, ma'am. I'm not sure who can answer this. Considering that the district has gone back face-to-face 5 days a week, would the summer school option be available in a virtual capacity as well as in-person capacity, or is it just all in-person?
So we've had can one of you answer that instead of me doing? The question is,
Well-
are we offering summer school in a face-to-face or virtual or both?
We're really pushing for that face-to-face instructional piece. If we get a request for a virtual component, we can certainly try to work with the school to make that available for a student. But we, are really pushing for the students to be there with the teachers in person. Now at the high school level, I mentioned those virtual SC students, if they're taking the course for full credit, we will encourage them to be aware that transportation is available, and they can come in and use those certified teachers as tutors if they need to for the virtual course. And then we've also discussed keeping teachers on the clock a little bit past the high school day in case there are students who want to log on for virtual assistance.
I'm sure I will follow up to that.
It is the state's intent that we provide the face-to-face. That they want us to be back face-to-face 5 days a week. And we already knew that that's what's best for students. But this last year has illustrated just how important that direct instruction is face-to-face.
Follow up?
And Dr. Hafner alluded to this as well, that we have some students that will be completing courses virtually. And I know that Dr. Hafner alluded to there are some students that are taking courses virtually or will be taking courses virtually. And I know that during the onset of COVID that broadband connectivity was an issue. Will we still be deploying the hotspots or the buses in the communities to assist those students that are taking part in the virtual option as well?
So the question
Dr.
is,
Martinox, can you repeat his question, please?
I will. So the question is, since we have high school students or secondary students learning through a virtual capacity, will we still be supplying hotspots and sending buses into the communities with Wi-Fi connectivity?
I know that we have been issuing Wi-Fi boxes to families all year long, and will continue to do so as long as the supply is available. And we can certainly speak with Mr. Myers about having buses in the community if we need to do that.
Thank you.
Yes, Dr. Hilton?
I have 3 questions for 3 different people. Dr. Hafner,
Yes, sir.
when you were talking about services that were offered during the school year, I take it you were talking about some sort of tutoring services, and you used the phrase, you extended this opportunity to, I think you said 4,000 students.
Yes, sir.
All right, so and we got a report in the superintendent's briefing this past week or week before about tutoring. That same phrase was used, extended this opportunity. My question, and I know you don't have the answer right now, but I would be curious to know how many students, like a weekly average, how many students took advantage of the opportunity that we extended to them? I got,
Yes.
I got the concept, we invited 4,000 people to participate. I would be curious if it ran for 3 weeks, how many did we have week 1, week 2, and week 3 that actually showed up?
Yes, sir, I don't have that exact breakdown, but I can tell you when I collected information from the principals a couple of weeks ago as to so far who was taking advantage, the number that took advantage was 1,626 to that point. I don't have the summative of success, but that was the number of participants.
And again, I don't expect the number tonight, but I would be curious to know how many actually took advantage of the opportunity. I'm afraid it's gonna be way less than 4,000,
Oh,
unfortunately.
yes. Mhm.
And then I have a question for Dr. McLeod. In the moving forward section, the summer jump start, you talked about the target audience was tier 2 and transition groups. What is a transition group?
Transition groups are those groups that are moving up to the next grade span. For example, pre-kindergarten going to kindergarten for the first time. 5th graders rising to 6th grade for the first time. 8th graders rising to 9th grade for the first time, because as we all know, those are very pivotal years, and what the intent is to help them be acclimated to the new grade span that they'll be moving to, building, as well as the expectations, and to try to front load some of the learning, since we know that we have some students that have struggled and have not been as successful being virtual as they usually were when they were in face-to-face instruction. And we know we have families that are very concerned, and we want to make sure we're supporting them with these Jumpstart camps, that they know the expectations and they feel comfortable with their student moving back to full face-to-face instruction.
Very good, thank you. And my final question is from Ms. Davis. During your thing about the wraparound services, you said there would be school psychologists, behavior interventionist, social worker. I'd be curious to know how many school psychologists, how many behavioral interventionists, how many social workers, how many counselors, how many mental health, and so on. Are we talking one school psychologist for all the kids in some school, or what? How many people are we talking about here?
For the purposes of the wraparound service, I have one school psychologist, one behavior specialist, one interventionist, to provide support for the district during these summer months. We have a team of mental health counselors that will be at every single school. And we also have a counselor that will be a part of the team as well. And their purpose is to provide the mental health SEL support for the district. Another team of school psychologists will be available as another layer of support, and they will be providing testing, etc. We do have other social workers who will also be available, who are providing other supports to the schools. But this dedicated team of wraparound services are unique for this summer sessions to help our students to transition through the summer and then get back on track to start their school successfully in the fall.
May I follow up on that, please? So what you're telling me is for all the kids in summer school, there's only going to be one psychologist, one behavior interventionist, and one social worker. Now you used the word there will be teams of mental health counselors at each school?
Yes.
How many are on the team, and they're going to be at every school?
Yes, we do have mental health counselors at every school, and they will be returning face-to-face at each school to support each school for the summer and then into the fall.
Well, again, one counselor at each school? You use the word team. How many on the
Yes,
team?
keep in
Baseball's
mind
got
that
9, football's got 11. How many on your team?
We have a dedicated counselor at each school who will be helping with the summer school and summer school sessions that will be going on at each site. The wraparound service is another additional layer of support to help our schools.
Well, I'm still not getting an answer about the team. But you're gonna have one counselor at each school?
Yes.
Are y'all getting, is this, huh?
We'll have one school guidance counselor and one mental health counselor at each school, full-time to support the teachers, the students that's there on a day-to-day basis during the summer.
Okay,
We'll have another layer of support that will include the wraparound services.
what does that mean, another layer? Where's that layer?
That's the wraparound services of the school psychologist, the behavior interventionist, and the special services counselor.
And that'll be
That's
those
the
people,
team.
those people will be at the district office.
Can you repeat that last question?
Those people will be at the district office.
Not necessarily. They're expected to be there to support the schools throughout the summer. But they are based at the annex, yes.
All right, let's follow.
Thank you.
Give someone else an opportunity. Dr. Baker?
Uh,
Maybe your other questions, but the answer
Yeah.
will be.
Yes, ma'am.
I wanted to come back to, Mr. Austin picked up on one of my questions and Dr. Hilton on the other one. But, I want to be absolutely clear. Dr. McLeod is saying State Department wants face-to-face. Dr. Hafner, you said we would look at virtual. Is it one or the other? Do we necessarily have to offer both? Can't we just say it is face-to-face?
So it depends. It depends on the medical needs of a child. So we have several students in the district who may require summer school or require the jump start, and they physically can't come in. So we will continue to call it e-learning, but of course, it's a virtual capacity. So we will have to offer virtual to some degree, to some extent, but for the majority of our students, it will be face-to-face.
So if it is virtual, it's in the child's IEP, or we've got medical
Or medical reasonable.
reasons to validate that otherwise it will be face-to-face.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and Dr. Davis, I wanted to follow up on a couple of things Dr. Hilton touched on a good minute with wraparound services. But the role, it would just be one school psychologist, and if I understood correctly, every school will have a summer school program. So that one psychologist will only be on call as needed, and basically the role of the school psychologist is going to be test and evaluate. So is there something else that would be unique this summer?
We will have one dedicated psychologist to provide the wraparound services. I have another team of psychologists who will be working on testing, evaluations, like they have done every summer. That team consists of 5 to 6 school psychologists.
Right, and that's
They
just,
evaluations and testings and working with the schools.
okay, that clarifies that. And Dr. McLeod, I believe indicated the compensation rate. What will the compensation rate be for these individuals?
The compensation rate for the wraparound services will be $50 an hour.
Okay,
And the compensation for the school psychologist that you mentioned earlier that will be providing their services of testing and evaluation during the summer will be their daily rate.
okay, thank you.
And we wanted to make sure we were consistent across the board and not creating complexities with the years of service. It is a flat fee because we know how challenging this year has been. And also to attract individuals to be able to do the work and who wants to do the work.
And Madam Chair, may I follow with a
Yes.
question for Dr. Martinox? Dr. Martinox, I know the state has moved to partnerships with mental health specialists in our schools and services. So will these mental health counselors come from Santee Wateree or?
So Ms. Davis, you want to answer that question? The question was about us partnering with mental health in the community. Dr. Baker wants to know, will we be partnering with other mental health providers?
In addition to Santee Wateree Mental Health is the question?
I just wanted you to repeat that. Yes, that
We currently are partnered with Santee Wateree Mental Health.
Yep, that was it. You said it earlier and I just needed it to be repeated.
And we're not paying them or?
No.
Yeah.
this is just for clarification. So the wraparound services is a standalone team that's dedicated just to the summer program?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, Ms. Davis, you wanna answer that question?
I think I heard him say that wraparound service is a dedicated team.
I already answered it for you.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Mr. Reagan.
Just for clarification as well, I think Ms. Ray asked this question earlier, and I may have missed it if it was answered. Each school will provide a summer program at the discretion of the building administrator, or each school is required to have a summer school program?
Each school is required to have a summer program.
Okay, that's K through 12, or
Yes.
elementary, middle,
Mhm.
thank you.
Okay, any additional questions? I'd like to thank the Office of Academics for your report, an excellent report. We do appreciate you, each and every one of you. Thank you.
And may I say this before we go to 4.2? I just want to publicly thank the team, one, for coming together and creating a plan, one that will be submitted at the end of May, but not just the team here, our school-based leaders and our teachers and everybody has come together just to make sure our children get what it is that they need. And so when we talk about content and content recovery or course recovery, that does not mean that they've not been doing the work. They have been doing the work. They've been doing the work day in and day out, just trying to, one, capture our children or recapture our children while also providing quality education to the best of our ability. I have been in several schools since we've been back 5 days face-to-face, and I will tell you, the schools that I've been in, it's almost like they've not missed a beat. And so I'm very pleased with what it is that I have observed so far. And so I just want to publicly thank Sumter School District, from executive leadership to our school-based staff and beyond. Our facilities, if you've looked at the buildings, for those of you who've visited, our schools are shining from floor to ceiling. It just gives me great pride to know that I'm here, but the people who are here are also dedicated to our children. So I just wanted the record to reflect that I do appreciate the work that's happening in our schools.
And Dr. Marnotz, the board, I'm sure, appreciate all of those individuals that you've identified, the role that they are playing in making sure that things are about our children and they are getting what we so greatly need and what they need. So, we echo appreciation and thank you to all of those individuals.
Thank you for that. And so at this time, we'll go to 4.2, the Office of Finance. Ms. Miller will do a presentation for the general fund statement, revenue, and expenditures through March 31st, 2021. Ms. Miller?
All right, good evening, Chairwoman Dr. Barbara Jackson, Vice Chair Dr. Baker, board members, and Superintendent Dr. Martin Knox. This evening, we are going to discuss the general fund revenue of expenditures through March 31st, 2021. The figures for the revenue have remained constant from last month's figures for our projected revenue for fiscal year 2021. Right now, we are projecting $128,042,000. Moving on to the next page. These figures have been adjusted through projections as of March 31st, 2021, and remain fairly similar to our projections last month, bringing the total projected expenditures to $123,874,028. This is down slightly last month, approximately $78,000, and it's mostly in the payroll expenditures. The change, resulting in the change of fund balance of approximately $4.9 million compared to last month's projection of $4.8 million. Again, these figures will continue to fluctuate as we continue through the fiscal year and close out our general ledger for the year and prepare for our annual audit that is reported on the modified cash basis. Additionally, if there are any grant funding changes, the general fund may need to cover those expenditures as well. Are there any questions?
Questions? Dr. Baker?
Ms. Miller, on the 135-day report, have you adjusted based on 135-day report at this point, or will that come next month?
No, sir, I have not adjusted on the 135th day number yet. I did get preliminary figures, and my projection would cover any change in the number from the 45th to the 135th day. So I do not think you will see a change in that projection that I have. I built in approximately 1.8 million that will cover what I'm seeing.
Good, thank you.
And that report's not due until the end of this week. And so there's some glitches in the system, not just here in Sumter, but we are making adjustments based on the information that we glean.
Oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Hilton.
That's okay. You know, Dr. Martin Knox, we've had ongoing discussions and questions with the Finance Committee, the board, about the possibility of some sort of bonus for our employees. And the year is coming to a close here, and it looks like many of the unhappy scenarios that we thought we might face are not going to happen. So I would hope that possibly at our next Finance Committee meeting, that we may be able to bring up again the possibility of offering some bonuses for our folks, as they have been working very hard, and it looks like our finances are gonna be better than we anticipated. So I just wanted to throw that thought out there. And I know I'm not the chairman of the Finance Committee, but I'm just throwing it out there for the chairman to consider as well. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Hilton.
Yes, ma'am.
And,
And 4.3, Ms. Miller, the capital projects update through March 31st, 2021.
Yes, ma'am. You should see the capital project reports in front of you. Those are our 500 funds, Fund 519 through Fund 525. I'm not going to go into the detail on each of those line items, but if you do have questions, I'll be happy to take those.
question? I have one question. I see Ari Davis is still here as far as the land. Where are we with that? Have we made any forward movement with that, or are we just still where we were before?
We are where we were before.
Are there any plans or anything to?
They should be discussed in executive sessions, a property contractual matter.
Okay, all right,
I agree.
okay. We will save that question for later. Okay. Are there any other questions? Not by Knox.
And 4.4, Ms. Miller, general fund fiscal year 2022 budget.
Yes, the next item here on the agenda, as Dr. Martin Knox has stated, is our Sumter School District proposed general fund budget for fiscal year 2021-22. I'd like to recognize the team effort during the budget process. Thank you, principals, executive team members, the finance department for your input and your assistance with preparing the budget and always putting children first with every decision that is made. Moving down to the next slide, let's start with talking about funding. I just want to revisit this. This was something we went over at the last board meeting, but the school district receives money from several sources that are reported in various funds. If you think about the sources as pots of money, this slide is a summary of some of the pots of money that we receive. We have money in the general fund that we use for operation of the school district. Then we have money in the special revenue funds, which are grants. Examples of grants are things such as Title I, ESSER 1, ESSER 2. Each grant agreement details exactly how those funds have to be spent, and they cannot be used for general operation of the school district, which includes things like normal repairs and maintenance, salary increases, etc. And then lastly, we have funding in the debt service fund, and this is where bond proceeds are recorded, and then those are used for capital improvements. Again, the example of the capital improvement is the fund, 500 funds that we just went over. Examples would be repairs to your building, roof replacements, etc. So tonight, I just want to make it very clear, we are talking about the general fund, and this is the operation of the school district. Moving down to the next slide, as I mentioned at the last board meeting, we have received preliminary figures from the State Department for fiscal year 2022. Please keep in mind that these are just projections. No legislation has been taken place yet that is in the final stage, and that these figures will vary. The proposed revenue for fiscal year 2022 is approximately $129,700,000 in the general fund. The largest changes in the revenue projections are as follows. The projected South Carolina Department of Education increase in revenue to cover the teacher salaries, teacher fringe, the Education Finance Act revenue, also known as EFA, a district and reading coaches is approximately $700,000 higher. EFA funding is the base student cost that is calculated. And so in our projection, our use is $11 increase per student. However, that calculation on how that is allocated to schools also includes our local tax payability. As I mentioned in the last meeting, that percentage has increased, which means in the state view, we have the local ability to pay for students' education, and thus they have decreased our allocation. So instead of receiving $189,000 increase, we are only going to receive approximately $100,000 in the EFA fund. The next item that has a significant increase is our Tier 3 state tax revenue. It's projected to increase $390,000. Tier 3 tax revenue relates to the residential exemption and thus not taxed by the school district, and we receive that tax revenue directly from the state. Now, this amount is just a projection, and each year it does vary from the actual. Next, impact aid. This is the only federal money that's recorded in the general fund, and it's projected to decrease approximately $100,000. I have met with the county, and per the assessor's preliminary growth factor is 1%, which was included in the projection of approximately $300,000. Now, the tax figures are very preliminary numbers, and we are awaiting additional information from the county to analyze the local tax revenue projection and the value of the mill, but I did include that 1% growth that was discussed. Last week, on April 21st, the county and myself met with the South Carolina Department of Revenue for a virtual meeting to discuss how to calculate the value of a mill, particularly this year because it is a reassessment year and it is done slightly different. So of all those items that we just discussed, the combined increase in revenue is projected to be approximately $1.3 million. Moving down to the projected mandated expenditure increases. Our projected increases remain the same as we discussed at the last board meeting, which were the teacher step increase of approximately $1 million, the 1% retirement increase, which is approximately $820,000, the 0.8 health insurance increase, which is approximately $100,000, and then our international teachers. We're not positive if the grant funding will be available, and so we need to be prepared to budget for this. A portion of it is in there, but with rising costs, we do need to increase that $200,000. So again, our projected mandated expenditures increase is 2.1. Moving down to projected needed expenditures. We have completed our analysis of the other needs at the district, which resulted in an increase in costs, which include the following: rising fuel costs. We're anticipating we need to increase that budget $150,000. Salary true-ups. When a vacant position is filled, the salary will either be higher or lower along with the benefits. For example, a single employee with just single health insurance cost is going to vary significantly from a married employee with full family coverage for the portion that the district has to pay. We budget on an average, but once those positions are filled, it will vary. And we do need to be prepared for that increase, which is approximately $1 million. I know that sounds like a large number, but when 90% of your budget is there, it really equates to 0.01% of the change. Next, software. Rising costs over the years and other funding no longer being available to cover those software costs. We need to be prepared for $58,000. Programs that have not been realistically budgeted in the past years. We're adding $79,000 for those. Recruitment. Other funding sources may no longer be available, and we need to increase recruitment to attract qualified candidates to our district. We increased the budget for $40,000. Electricity and maintenance. Between rising costs and having realistic budgets, we need to increase that budget $800,000. Plumbing. Over the years, we've had deferred maintenance as a result of the financial crisis, and now we need to perform quarterly maintenance. So we are increasing this budget $144,000. And then lastly, security. Again, rising costs. We currently pay the city and the county for our school resource officers, our SROs, and the security at our games and activities. And when the county or the city does a cost of living increase, we are then in turn have to pay that increase to those folks because we pay the city and the county directly. Now, please keep in mind, this $2.5 million of increases does not include any of the staffing positions that were requested from the school. It does not include unfreezing the frozen vacancies that the district has. So we will continue to be understaffed. And then additionally, these figures do not include a cost of living increase for anyone other than teachers. Keep in mind that support staff have not had a cost of living increase since fiscal year 2019. Next, moving on to projected expenditure decrease. On this slide, you will see that we are projecting a $2.4 million decrease in expenditure. This is a result of shifting allowable expenditures to the ESSER funding for continuity of employment. Please keep in mind that this ESSER funding is one-time funding, so we will have to have these expenditures back in the general fund after that funding runs out. Additionally, there are various other expenses that have decreased naturally over time, such as our interest expense and debt payment, as one of our general fund loans was paid in full this year, and then various departments that trim back budgets to assist with the needs across the district. Next, moving on to the projected other financing sources and uses. The other financing sources are the transfers from the Education Improvement Act Fund, or EIA funding, and then also the indirect cost revenue. The EIA is funding we receive from the state that relates to the teachers. It includes the teachers' salary and fringe increase amount, along with the Teacher of the Year funding and National Board certification salary funding. I'm projecting that we need to increase that, or that money coming over to the general fund will increase by approximately $50,000. So that's revenue coming into the general fund, increasing $50,000. And then also, as we have a higher indirect cost rate that can be charged with the ESSER 2 fund, we do anticipate this to increase by approximately $250,000. Again, that's revenue over to the general fund. That's for a total increase of other financing sources of $300,000. And then the other financing uses. These are transfers to other funds. We do expect an increase in this as our funding for reading coaches is being decreased approximately $400,000 As such, the general fund will need to cover those salaries, which is typically paid by the state in a separate fund. So on the next slide, in summary, this shows you the total revenue as being projected at $129,700,859. Projected expenditures, $132,820,163. The other financing sources, $4,773,998. And then lastly, other financing uses of $2,360,000. This leaves the district faced with a shortfall of $705,306. On the next slide, we are seeking the board's input this evening on how to balance the budget. We have identified several viable options at this point, which include the following. 1, to cut expenditures. This would include staffing reductions, as 91% of the budget is for salaries and benefits. 2, commit a portion of the fund balance budget. 3, request a millage increase from the county. Or 4, a combination of the 3 items above. And at this point, I will take questions and seek the input from the board on how to proceed.
Questions? Dr. Baker?
Couple of things, Ms. Miller. One, you mentioned about the state decreasing the reading coaches allocation by $400,000. Is there any rhyme or reason why the state decided to do that?
I can't speak for the states, but I can show you that just the revenue code 31353535 was $709,000 for fiscal year 21, and it's projected to only be $299,000, which is a decrease $409,742.
Okay. And this question would be for Dr. Martin Knox. I know the state said that they were looking at revamping, that they didn't feel that was effective. Have we got data to show how effective our reading coaches are with our kids and their progression?
We do not. And we continue to look at that, look at the placement, look at the performance data as you just spoke of. We began having the conversation at the beginning of last year, actually, because we knew this anticipated cut or reduction was going to occur. So we made some shifts. We formulated another plan to see how we could maybe put our coaches in a cluster, because we know how important that is. But in terms of collecting data, once we began to have the conversation, and COVID hit and kind of stopped everything at that particular point in time. But that is something that we need to evaluate. But right now, I didn't think it was prudent to the learning and the development of our children to just cut our coaches. So that is an expenditure that I think is worth having.
Okay. And maybe we could get some data at some point?
Yes, sir.
Once we ever get back to normal?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And the second thing, in looking at the areas there, I would say start with, just my opinion, start with cutting expenditures. And this would go back to something that I pointed out earlier, and I know that right now we have preliminary figures on terms of enrollment, but our enrollment has decreased. And if our enrollment decreases, then our need for support staff, teachers should also decrease to reflect that enrollment. I know there's an argument that says we want a lower student-teacher ratio, but if we are saying that's what the goal of the district is, then we need some data to show what the student-teacher enrollment ratio is for all the schools. And I know a lot of folks say that if you lower the student-teacher ratio, that you're going to see increase in performance. But actually, if you look, some of our schools where the student-teacher ratios are lower are some of the schools that are struggling. And I know you can find data on both sides of the fence, but other ways that we could look at staffing and looking at how we can save a teaching position if we've got For example, an athletic director at every one of the high schools, maybe each one of them could pick up one class that would save a teaching slot. Or if we got head coaches that don't teach any classes, maybe they could pick up one in their areas of certification. So I would strongly say, before we jump down into those others, let's see how we could do that, because as you said, 91% of the budget's tied up in personnel costs, and that would make a big impact if we started looking at cutting expenditures that is going to impact the need for personnel. Thank you.
Okay, I think I saw Brian hand, then I'll go to Cheryl, and then I'll come to you.
Yes, ma'am. This question's for Ms. Miller. I'm not sure if you answered this or not, but I think I heard you said you had conversation with the county about the value of the county and state about the value of a mill.
Yes, sir. I have talked to the county as far as how to calculate the value of the mill and what our projections are going to be for this year.
So with the budget shortfall that we're facing, is there a preliminary calculation of how many mills that would be?
I'm sorry, what was that question?
Are there preliminary numbers of what a mill would possibly be?
Yes, I have those figures based on the calculation that I have prepared. This is a net mill value, and right now, what I'm currently used was $186,000, which included the 1% growth factor. So I had $184,000 per mill, and I projected $186,000 per mill. Now, with that net factor, that includes an allowance for doubtful accounts, 10%.
Okay.
And I have a follow-up question for Dr. Martin Knox. And it's actually piggybacking on what Dr. Baker brought up about the decrease in enrollment. Even though we have a decrease of enrollment, will there be a need for a virtual option in the fall or next school term period?
So we continue to have the dialogue about a virtual option, but there are also, there's also information out there that if we have students who are learning in virtual capacity, we will use the per pupil allocation for those students. And so we're waiting for that to see whether it's going to pass or not. But as I stated earlier, for summer school, we are going to have students regardless who need to have a virtual option or e-learning option because of their physical limitations or medical conditions that they may face. So we're continuing to weigh the odds and waiting to see what the outcome's going to be.
So if the legislation, the current legislation that's out there right now that speaks to a teacher not having to teach in person and virtually, will we be able to have teachers on staff that are solely virtual to address that issue where we do have students that would need a virtual option?
So we would still do it the way we've been doing it, the way we've been doing it all along, and that's in e-learning. And so we actually contract with an external agency to provide that. And we also have staff who do it as well, or we have had staff that do it as well. When we're talking about the shortfall of student enrollment, what we've been talking about is utilizing some of those teachers that are over our student to teacher ratio, to use some of them for virtual approach and not have them do both.
Thank you.
Okay. Johnny?
I
Oh,
think
I'm
Cheryl
sorry.
was next.
Yes. I'm sorry.
All right, first I want to say that I do agree with Dr. Baker about looking at the decreasing our staffing and also looking at courses that have minimal enrollment in them, and so that we can maximize the use of the staff that we have. You mentioned in one of your expenditures increase something about programs that had not been realistically budgeted. But could you explain that a little further?
That was my question.
Yes, ma'am. The one program that comes to my mind, Dr. McLeod can probably help with this. This is the REACH program, and it has been underfunded since I've started at the district. We had to request a transfer from the board a couple of years ago to be able to make that program happen. And so that has just been something that has not been funded.
Okay. And I had one more question. I know that it's gonna be coming up soon that you do your presentation to county council. Will that presentation, I know that you and Dr. Martin Knox, include, the explanations to the council about how the ESSER funds have impacted and, making some, educating them about how that's impacting and the short term of that?
So yes, ma'am. And I also wrote an op-ed to help explain to our community the ways in which we can utilize the funds, because I think there's some misconceptions out there that the ESSER funds would help us with our fund balance, our general fund balance. So
Yeah.
I needed to provide a more global explanation as to the what's and the hows and the whys.
I think that's definitely a misconception, that we have a lot of extra money because
Correct.
of those funds.
Okay,
That's all.
okay, Dr. Hilda.
Thank you. So unfortunately, I have to take issue with two of my colleagues, Dr. Baker and Ms. Ray, about the, decreasing the staff. I think that we need to reduce class counts wherever we can. And I would also submit, Dr. Baker, that you said that some of the schools that had the lower class counts, the achievement doesn't reflect that. And I would argue that there are other issues, that the formula is way more complicated as to the achievement results than just class count. The picture's way more complicated. So I'm an advocate for lowering class counts wherever we can. I do have a question about personnel though, if I could address that to Ms. Miller. Ms. Miller, this budget was set up to reflect that we fill every position that the principals have asked for, is that correct?
No, sir. It includes the positions that were already in the budget from last year, and if there were any new positions requested during our budget meeting with principals, it does not include that.
It does not include a request for additional staff.
That is correct.
But it includes the exact number of teachers we have at this moment in time?
There are, with the reallocation to the ESSER funds for allowable funding, that is something that includes salaries being allowed to be paid out of ESSER funds so that we continue to employ those employees.
Okay. How many vacancies, how many subs are we have in the district right now? How many positions are unfilled at this moment in time? Approximately.
Dr. Kumis, what's the number now? Is it 38 vacancies? Or has that number changed since we last talked?
No, that number's increased just a little bit since we last talked. Give me just a second. For this year, it looks like with the teaching vacancies, we're at 37.5.
So, but the average over the course of the year has been somewhere around 25 or 30.
31.
31. Do we have any reason to believe that next year's gonna be any different? We do? We think we're gonna be able to fill all those 31 vacancies for next year?
I was thinking about going in the opposite
Or
direction.
you think the vacancies are gonna be higher?
Yes.
Well, then if the vacancies are gonna be higher, then our expenditures are gonna come down automatically. Are they not? Sub pay is cheaper than teacher pay, is it not?
And some of the positions we don't have subs in there. We've actually contracted out services.
My point is, however, is that this budget is built on filling every position. Yes, it is. We know we're not gonna fill every position. You're saying we're gonna have more empty positions next year than we got this year.
Dr. Kumis,
So-
what number are we looking at for next year? If we didn't fill this year's, was it 50 something? Or has that number changed too?
With the vacancy we have for both years, right now, it's more, it's along the lines of 47.
Okay, well, anyway, my point is that, is that we may not have a $700,000 shortfall because we're not gonna fill all these positions. And I would argue, let's not cut staff in anticipation of a $700,000 shortfall. Thank you so much.
Question. John was right where I was thinking. I just got one question for Ms. Miller.
Okay.
Ms. Miller, the 705,000 shortfall, is that an accurate number or that's just projection? Because when you went through the presentation, I think some of the numbers maybe look, they give or take, maybe elevated, some may be right on point, but the 705,000, is that a definite, we're gonna have that shortfall, or that could change, give or take?
That could change. It will fluctuate. These are based on the numbers that are in the system. I know it's an oddball number because we have everything to the penny in the system based on salaries and expenditure. This is at the time that we pulled the numbers where we believe these expenditures would be. This also includes the projections of the information we know right now.
Right.
That could change as well. It is a reassessment year with the county, so I'm unsure where those property values will be after the reassessment. I'm unsure what the state is going to pass as far as legislation, as far as the base student cost. There's several variables out there of the unknown. I still don't even know how much the state is gonna pay for the teacher step increase for this year. We have to pay it by June 15th, and I still don't know what that dollar amount of revenue is, and they said we probably won't receive it until July. So there still are a lot of unknowns, and these numbers will change. They will fluctuate, and they can go up or down. But at this time that we ran the numbers, this was our best projection.
Thank you very much. You mentioned teacher step increase, and that'll just go for only teachers?
If I understand the question is, that's just for the teacher?
Yes.
Yes, that is only for the teachers. That does not include anyone else.
The 0.8% health insurance increases for everybody?
Yes, sir. We have to increase health insurance by 0.8%. That's what the district pays. The employees are not seeing the increase. The district is seeing that increase.
And there's another piece of legislation that's on, that's out there to give bus drivers a 5% pay increase as well. So we have to to Ms. Miller's point, this is projected, so we can only go by projections. And it could go up and down any day at any given time. And so we need to be in a space to be able to give that 5% when it comes, instead of digging deep and finding ourselves in a difficult situation.
Thank you very much for that. Very helpful.
Okay, we're gonna hear from Mr. McLeod, followed by Mr. Austin, and then followed by Mrs. Shred, in that order, please.
Yes, ma'am. Going back to what Dr. Baker was saying about coaches who are not in a classroom, could we not use them? And I think that you were saying not to reduce the number of teachers, I might be wrong, but to utilize what we already have. Well, we could put him or her in a classroom instead of putting a sub in that classroom, or instead of contracting out, to fill those positions with what we already have. Is that?
A combination of both, that plus looking at the number of classes that are offered, and you get into a situation where you've got certain singles ones you're gonna have to have, but let's look at setting a minimum number for a class to make, like at least 12 kids or whatever. And that would eliminate and free up, but it would be a combination of both. But if you're looking at, and I just threw out athletic directors and some of the head coaches,
Right.
and if you gave each one period or something, 3 of them, that takes care of a teaching position. Plus, we're already gonna be faced with positions we can't fill, so this would help us a little bit too if we did something like that.
But you were saying, you weren't saying to reduce the number, but to keep from having to fill positions that are in
Keep
here.
having to fill and
Right.
look at ways that we could come up creatively, still give the service to our students that they need with a certified person in that class. And a certified person, in my opinion, would always be better than a substitute in there.
That answer your question? All right, Mr. Alston?
Yes, ma'am. This is not a question, it's more so a comment. But I would say that this board needs to be very cautious about sending the message that our human capital, when I say our human capital, I'm speaking of our teaching staff or our staff, period, and our students are not expendable. And reduction of staffing is going to send the message that they are expendable. They have worked tirelessly through this pandemic and have suffered, whether that be a loss of a family member, the loss of a home, reduction in hours, or some type of impact has been made in their lives because of COVID. And we should not be looking at reducing staff in the middle of a pandemic. And I know there's arguments on both sides of the aisle about whether or not classroom sizes really make a difference. But our students deserve it, because we just went through a financial crisis where they went through a reduction in staff. And we're just getting back to a point to somewhat of a state of normalcy for our students when they were hit with COVID. So if we come out of this now and saying we're gonna reduce staff, that's sending a message to our staff as well as our students that they're expendable. But we, as a district, I don't think that's the direction we should be going in, because if you look around the county right now, there's billboards all over this county that's trying to recruit our staff. We have positions that we can't fill, but if we cut them, what do we say to our students that deserve this and that deserve to be in smaller class sizes so that they can get the one-on-one attention to be successful? So I just want this board to be cautious of that moving forward.
Thank you, Mr. Austin.
And I want to respond to that. That's what I wanted to say. I don't want us to leave here with anyone with the impression that either Dr. Baker or I are not for the students. I'm all for as small class sizes as we can possibly have, but we have to do an analysis of what we've got. You've got to look, our enrollment has decreased. You hear that. So that means that some classes are not big. There are some reasonable sized classes. There are some that are big. Sometimes that can be corrected with balancing of the classes. So you really have to analyze how many students we have, what courses they're going to take, and how many teachers you need. I certainly do not want to leave us in a situation where a teacher has a full load every day of every period, or elementary has too many kids. I'm all for especially the lower grades having as fewer kids as we can do, and I still want to do that, but we do have some places where I think we need to look at and see if we can reduce it, and that's possible. But that analysis has to be done before we make a decision. Okay, that's all I got to say.
Madam Chair, can I just follow up with that?
I'm gonna say something, but then we'll move on.
I want to follow up to something Brian said.
We are now down to almost 8 o'clock, but I don't think that anyone is saying eliminate anyone.
Right.
I didn't get that. I know that when Ms. Miller asked for questions, she did say something in the essence of she's asking the board for input.
Right.
So anything that's said in here is input, but nothing will be done without documentation that it's okay to move in this direction. I think that all of our teachers know that we treasure them, we value them, and they know that even through the COVID, when other districts were doing things with the staff and the bus drivers and the custodians and all, we stood there firm that they would have a job and will get their salaries. So I think that they know that we are in this with them until the perfect end. And, you know, regardless of what we glean from this, it was input on the subject. And please don't anyone think that we're saying we're going to eliminate anything, because that is not what we're saying in here. This is for board discussion and input for the staff of Ms. Miller and those that are involved in that, as well as the other persons that give input into the budget and all. So we know that we stand with our teachers, we stand with all of our staff, and we're supporting this administration as well in all that we say and do. So that being said, I think we're gonna move on, and moving to the rest of the presentation that might be in front of us and move on. We get an amen on that?
Amen.
Okay, Dr. Penelope.
Ms. Miller, your last portion for the evening, the ESSER 2 spending plan.
Yes, ma'am. All right, the last thing that we're going to talk about this evening is the ESSER 2 spending plan. As you can see on this slide, there are 15 allowable categories. 12 of these are the same as the ESSER 1, and then there are 3 new categories. Sumter School District has been allocated $23.6 million of ESSER 2 funds that must be spent by September 30th, 2023. All of the allowable categories are listed here. As I mentioned, 12 are the same as ESSER 1, and those were already presented to the board. Those are categories 1 through 11 and number 15. The 3 new categories are as follows. Number 12, addressing the learning loss. Number 13, school facility repairs and improvements to reduce the risk of virus transmission. And number 14, improvement of indoor air quality in school facilities. I'm going to provide a lot of detail about these categories later on, but I just wanted to start with the allowable categories. Next, this is a pie chart that gives you a visual of the working budget allocation as of Thursday, April 22nd, 2021. The amounts will fluctuate as we move forward with the grant approval process and continue to assess the needs of the district. The board will be kept apprised of these changes with updates from the superintendent. As you can see, there are 3 main sections that total to 83% or 19 million of the budget. First, starting at the top of the pie chart, 1% has been allocated for mental health support, or $349,000. 2% has been allocated to technology for $447,000. 3% has been allocated to nurses, $742,000. 4% has been allocated for signage and technology enhancements, which is $994,000. 7% or $1.65 million for sanitization. And then moving to those large 3 categories, 24% or $5.7 million is in the other category. We'll go into detail. There are specific things in the other category those are designated for. 26% or $6 million is for HVAC air quality improvements. And then lastly, 33% or $7.7 million, the largest category, is for our summer learning and after school tutoring. Moving to the next slide. Number 3, this is the category 3, provisions for principals and other school leaders. This was budgeted for $741,000. This is the category where we are funding the nurses, additional pay for the nurses. Those are after hours contact tracing and summer hours, supplies for nurses, and then travel reimbursement for nurses. On the next slide, category 5, development and implementation of procedures and systems. This is where we have designated allowable expenditures related to COVID-19, such as banners, signage, hall dividers, and technology enhancements. The signage includes stay 6 feet apart, wear your mask, etc. Moving on to the next slide. Category 7, sanitization services and supplies. We have $1.6 million budgeted here, almost 1.7. This is a category for purchasing supplies to sanitize and clean the facilities of a local education agency. These are the same type of expenditures that we presented in the ESSER 1 budget. They include personal protective equipment such as your mask, your face shields, your gloves. It includes hand sanitizer dispenser, cleaning supplies, wipes, desk shields, electric spray guns, water bottle refilling stations, and also positions for building service employees. Moving to the next category, category 9, purchase of education technology. This includes hardware, software, and connectivity for students who are served by the local education agency that aids in regular and substantive educational interaction between students and their classroom instructors. This may include assistive technology or adaptive equipment. These are the same types of expenditures in ESSER 1, along with the addition of 2 support staff for technology. So this was your Chromebooks, software such as Screencastify, Adobe DC, Grammarly, Microsoft Office, etc. And as I mentioned, the 2 technology support positions were a help desk. Category 10, providing mental health services and support. We budgeted $349,000. This is a category that has allowable expenditures for 1 school psychologist, 3 social workers, supplies for the psychologists and the social workers, and then travel reimbursement for both of those positions as well. Category 11, summer learning and after-school programs. Again, this was our largest category. This is approximately $7.7 million. This is the planning and implementation of activities related to summer learning and supplemental after-school programs. It includes providing classroom instruction, and we have, as was presented earlier by the team, we have our summer school credit recovery, which is in the month of June. We have our summer jump start, which is in the month of July. It includes salaries and benefits, transportation, food services, and supplies for both of those categories. And then it also has the content recovery, which is tutoring during the school year, which includes salaries and benefits. Category 14, improvement of indoor air quality in school facilities. This has approximately $6 million budgeted. The allowable expenditures within this category are HVAC upgrades and replacement, and a project manager position to oversee those improvements. This is combined with our energy savings program, and we'll be working jointly with that project. Category 15, the other category. As I mentioned, $5.7 million has been allocated to this category. This is for other activities that are necessary to maintain the operation or the continuity of services in local education agencies and continuing to employ existing staff of the local education agency. Allowable expenditures within this category must be directly related to COVID, meaning if we did not have the pandemic, these items would not be needed, but are needed now. Items include, first, the indirect cost allocation. We are allowed to charge a portion of this grant to give money over to the general fund. So it's revenue going into the general fund. That has been included in here. A virtual academy has been included within this category. Continuity of employment of $2.4 million was included in this category. A contract accountant to oversee the ESSER funds is included in here. Lost textbook fees of $100,000 is included here. Some items for the food service department. We need tents, we need raincoats and jackets and paper products. Everything has changed how they are operating and distributing food, and they need those items that they traditionally would not need. And that is the conclusion of our ESSER 2 spending plan. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to take those now.
Okay, are there any questions? Let's see, Reverend Nagani.
Yes, one question I want to follow up with, it might be for Dr. Martin Knox, or you may can help. Dr. Hilton asked about seeing an ESSER plan the board seen the ESSER plan before it's submitted to the State Department. Where are we on that?
So it's not due till when is it due, Jennifer?
The spending plan,
Yeah, the ESSER plan. When is
there's no specific due date
for the,
for the plan. There's no specific due date. It just needs to be submitted, and you cannot spend ESSER 2 until your ESSER 1 funds.
I know
are
that
spent.
part, but I thought there was a date, well, let me go here. There's a timeline for the funds to be
Right.
spent. There is no time specifically for the plan. However, we can't spend any of this
Understood.
until the other monies are expended, with the exception of the 3 categories.
Understood.
And so we plan to submit as soon as we can, so we can begin spending over in these funds as well, since many of them, the 3, are the areas in which we're going to utilize these funds for, if that makes sense.
Yeah, understood. I just, Dr. Hill,
And
raised a
we
question.
do have to submit that for the road to recovery plan. We do have to list, where our funding sources are coming from, which is due May 28th.
Okay, I said 20-something.
Okay,
Yeah.
and the board will see that prior to it being submitted? Okay, thank you so much.
Any additional questions?
I have, just a
Dr.
couple.
Baker?
Ms. Miller, in the plan, there is, 2 additional tech support people, a project manager, contract accountant position. Are those under the same guidelines that they're gonna be 2-year positions, or how's that gonna be handled? Same way?
Yes.
Yes, sir, and the number that's built in there actually is just 1 year.
1 year.
I built in 1 year of salary for those positions, and all of these items, it's anticipated we will spend in 1 year, because we will then receive ESSER 3 funding that has to be spent by September 30th, 2024. So our goal is to spend as much of this next fiscal year 2022, so those are 1 year salary positions right now, with the plan of including those in ESSER 3.
Thank you.
I think Dr. Hilton, you had a question?
Yes, ma'am, I have several, actually. Ms. Miller, so.
Yes, sir.
The summer school costs for this summer will be paid out of ESSER 1 funds. Yes?
No, sir, they will be paid out of ESSER 2 funds. That's why we want to get this submitted as quickly as possible, so that we then have access to these funds, for summer this year.
Okay. I thought we still had ESSER 1 funds left over that we have not spent.
There are $150,000 for, this type of work, but some of that will be utilized with the tutoring that we currently are, offering for our students. We
Okay.
are using CRF funds and CARES ESSER 1 funds for tutoring. If there's any remaining, we will do a budget amendment, and we'll use it for summer school if needed.
Okay, well, that leads into my next question is, I keep hearing the term, we have to spend ESSER 1 before we can spend ESSER 2, but I'm also told from other sources that as long as the ESSER 1 funds are quote-unquote encumbered, then we don't have to actually spend them. For example, if we had allocated ESSER 1 funds to pay for summer school, this is just a scenario. We had anticipated costs for summer school, then we could go ahead and spend ESSER 2. But what you're telling me is we're gonna be spent all our ESSER 1 by the end of May?
Our plan is to have ESSER 1 spent by June 30th. We do have some salaries that are included in ESSER 1, and I have budgeted through June 30th. I would feel comfortable that the state would allow that the budgeted salaries would be considered encumbered, but their wording was substantially encumbered. It's a gray area on my definition of substantially versus the State Department or an auditor.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm trying to get a handle on it. I don't see how, if we're not gonna spend the ESSER 1 till June 30, how are we gonna use ESSER 2 for summer school? Because summer school starts, earlier than that. But your explanation of being encumbered then answers that question. Is that we're gonna argue or submit that our funds from ESSER 1 are encumbered, thereby we can spend the ESSER 2 funds. And that plan works for me, and I'm sure it's gonna work for the state for them. One other question, these allocations, you know, the 7 million for, summer school, we made those allocations, right? We came up with all these different allocations. The guidelines only say you have to spend the money for A, B, C, D, and E. It doesn't say how much you have to spend for A, B, C, D, or E. We came up with those numbers, correct?
Yes, sir. For ESSER 2, we are allowed to come up with those numbers. For ESSER 3, they will mandate a certain percentage be allocated to the learning loss, but this one did not specify percentages.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Hilton.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Ms. Miller? Any additional questions? Okay, Dr. Martin.
So this concludes the superintendent's report. Thank you, Ms. Miller.
You're welcome.
Well, I'll echo again, thanks to all of you for what you've done and what you've shared this evening, and we certainly do appreciate you. And Mrs. Miller, thank you for the final report there. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, we're now down at the portion of our meeting that calls for the board to enter into executive session. On behalf of the Board of Trustees, I want to once again this evening thank you for your interest in Sumter School District. There is no designated time for how long we will be in executive session. Therefore, if you're unable to be with us upon our return to open session, we thank you and for your support and wish you a great week. And I failed to say thank you to Dr. Penelope Knox for her leadership in all of this along with the others. So thank you. And may I have a motion to enter into executive session? We don't have any items for voting on this evening. So with no further business, this meeting is adjourned at 9:26 p.m. Thank you, and we appreciate your attendance and participation. Have a good evening.
All right, everybody.